So let's talk about something strange that's happening. A disease that, we all thought was pretty much in the rearview mirror is suddenly back. And it's a real puzzle because we're talking about measles. We've had a vaccine for this for ages. And that really is the big question here, isn't it? We've got this vaccine. It's safe. It's effective. It's worked for decades. So how in the world is a disease that's totally preventable suddenly on the rise again? Well, that's what we're going to get into. Let's try and unravel this thing together. All right, to get to the bottom of this, we're going to look at 5 key factors. Think of them as pieces of a puzzle. First, the comeback itself. Then we'll look at something called the vaccination gap. After that, we'll dive into the role of misinformation, then a bigger crisis of trust, and finally, how our super connected world plays a huge part in all this. Okay, so first up, let's just sit with how weird this whole situation is. We have a disease that we absolutely know how to stop, and yet it's returning. I mean, this is the bedrock of the whole story, right? The science on this has been solid for a very, very long time. We have the tool to fix this, the MMR vaccine, and it is just incredibly effective. And yet, here we are. Even with this amazing tool in our back pocket, we're seeing cases pop up. And not just in far-off places, but right here in developed countries like New Zealand. That's the real head-scratcher we need to figure out. So where do we start? Well, the most direct reason, the most obvious place to look is what experts call the vaccination gap. This is really the first big piece of the puzzle for us. And here's the thing, it's not just one simple issue. It's actually a few different gaps that have opened up over time. So first, you've got a whole group of young adults, people who might have missed their shots back in the 90s or early 2000s. Then, more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic totally threw a wrench in routine health services, so a lot of kids missed their scheduled vaccinations. And on top of all that, you have the persistent problem of some people just having a hard time getting to a doctor, particularly if they live in more rural areas. So if you put those 3 things together, the pandemic disruption, that older immunization gap, and the access issues, what you get are these pockets of vulnerability. It's like having holes in a defensive wall. And all those little holes make it way, way easier for a virus like measles to sneak in, find a foothold, and just start spreading. But, a gap in vaccination coverage doesn't just appear out of thin air. Something often makes it wider. And that brings us to our next piece of the puzzle, the massive influence of misinformation. It's the stuff that really pours fuel on the fire of doubt and hesitation. And here's why it's so tricky. Think about it. Real, factual health info is usually kind of calm. It's nuanced. Misinformation, on the other hand, it's designed to be emotional, to be shocking, to be simple. It's not trying to inform you, it's trying to get a reaction out of you. Our brains are just naturally wired to zoom in on things that seem new or threatening, and misinformation plays that card perfectly. That's exactly why it can spread like wildfire online. And this is a really critical point. The very way our social media feeds are designed can actually work against public health. The algorithms, the code that decides what pops up on your screen, their main job is to keep you engaged, to keep you scrolling. And what's more engaging, a calm, boring, factual report, or a shocking, emotional, and false claim about a vaccine? Yeah, you see the problem. Okay, but here's the thing. Misinformation needs fertile ground to grow. It can't just take root anywhere. And that leads us to a much deeper problem, something that's been brewing for a while, a real crisis of trust. Think about it. If you start to feel like you can't trust the very institutions that are supposed to look out for you, the government, big pharma, even traditional news, where do you turn? You start looking for answers somewhere else. And that loss of trust creates this vacuum, and misinformation is just perfectly engineered to rush in and fill that space. And there's another layer to this too. Let's be honest, after the last few years, we're all a bit tired, right? All those constant health warnings and alerts during the pandemic, it's exhausting. There's a name for it, message fatigue. And when you're just plain worn out and maybe a little skeptical, it's so much harder for important advice, even routine stuff, to actually get through all that noise. So let's recap where we are. We've got these gaps in vaccination. They're being made worse by a flood of misinformation. And it's all happening in this environment where trust is low. So what's the final ingredient that takes this from a local issue to a global threat? It's simply how connected our world is today. Just think about how it works. An outbreak can kick off pretty much anywhere with low vaccination rates. Let's say Samoa, for example. But today, an infected person, maybe not even showing symptoms yet, can just hop on a plane, and in a single flight, they can land in New Zealand. It just takes a few hours. And that's the thing to remember. In our modern world, a virus doesn't care about borders on a map. And this is exactly why big global health groups like the World Health Organization are hammering this point home. You can't solve the measles problem in just one country. It's impossible. It has to be a global effort, with everyone working to keep vaccination rates high everywhere. So when you take a step back and look at all these pieces together, you realize it's not just one thing. The return of measles is really a perfect storm. You've got these gaps in immunity, then you have online misinformation spreading like crazy. All of that is happening in a climate where trust is already low. And the whole thing gets supercharged by just how easy it is to travel around the globe. And really, that leaves all of us with a much bigger question, one that goes way beyond just this one disease. We live in a world where we're just bombarded with information 24/7. So how do we figure out what's real and what isn't? How do we decide who and what to trust? That, I think, is the real challenge that the return of measles forces us to confront.